Valerie, did you always have these elevations here in this woodland garden?
We did. Actually, the previous owner designed this garden, and I'm just the fortunate beneficiary that's now working on it. And it was designed, he was a painter, and I think it was designed for when they sat inside the house, they could look up at these paths.
Oh, how nice. I mean, I see there's epimediums and beautiful ferns, Solomon seal.
A lot of native plants. We've got columbine, the native columbine over here just coming into bloom. This is miterwort that you see a lot out in the woods. So they did a good job of keeping these here and blending the two things together. And then of course they also were heronswood fans, so we get blue panda, you know, fun things to go with it. This is very shady, as you can see. Even on a very sunny day, this is all dappled shade by 12 o'clock. And so it's fortunate. It gives me really two gardens, one in the shade and then one in the full sun that you'll see. So come on in here and I'll show you something special. As you probably noticed, we have lots and lots of leaves, and we have finally figured out what to do with them. We collect them all right out here. My husband mows them, and then we truck them all in here, and we just leave them for at least a year, better two, and we turn them a couple of times, and we are making leaf mold down here. See, look at this. It's still very rough, but it's turning in. Smells good. Take a sniff.
Oh, yeah.
Isn't that nice?
Just nice and like a forest.
That's right. That's right. And so a lot of this is what went into our garden, and we'll put, if it's broken down more by the fall, we'll layer it over the top for the winter.
Now, do you use any of the thick leaves, like the laurel leaves?
No, they don't break down. They take too long.
Okay. So which leaves do you use?
We use alder leaves and all of these deciduous trees that we're standing under, maple, katsura, everything around. Except these hedge varieties, right, and not rhododendron leaves. So we're leaving the shade part of the garden behind, and we're coming into full sun. Well, this used to be a bit more shady, but we had a couple of alder trees that were threatening us, so we cut them down. So now we've come into full sun. You can see it's almost a totally different garden.
Lamiums and
We've got
lots of forget-me-nots.
Right, lots of forget-me-nots this year. More epimedium, good ground covers. And then this is my cutting garden for the summer. I've got full of campanula, the tall bellflowers, and more columbine, roses, alstroemeria, lilies. It's probably a little too much, but I can't resist.
I love bouquets.
I do too.
Oh, what a nice area for a vegetable.
Isn't it? It's just perfect. The sun rises up over here and sweeps up overhead and goes past that way. So we get about 6 hours. We're not full sun all day, but we do need 6 hours to get just about anything growing. And I've been working on this garden for about 4 years. When we arrived, it was just sand. This whole area is built on a sand dune, and this was mostly sand, and it was pretty discouraging. But we have spent years amending it with compost, a leaf mold from our own leaves all around us, steer manure, mushroom compost, whatever we could think of. So I think we're at a good point right now. And I'll just show you some of the things that I've been doing this year. Of course, the tomatoes have just gone in. These are potatoes, and one of these potatoes has an interesting story. This little potato is called an ozette, and it has come from the Makah Nation. And the story that they have in their lore is that the Spanish from South America put an establishment at Nia Bay in 1792, and they were trading potatoes, and they've been growing them ever since, and now they're available a little bit for the public.
So it's our own heirloom.
It's our own heirloom, that's right. And these I grew last year and saved some over winter, so it's even my heirloom now.
Talk a little bit about your spirals and the red plastic.
Yes, the red plastic has two functions. The most practical one is it directs the water and any fertilizer straight down into the roots, which of course is very important for tomatoes. And then there is some theory that having the red underneath reflecting up onto the tomato may improve the growth. The spirals are a different way of staking a tomato. They actually have, see if I can unwind one. You see, you put it in the ground and you just wind the stem around it like this. If you're a little impatient, It has been known to happen that you lose your growing tip, but if you're careful, you do it, and this grows and grows and grows. It'll grow right up to the top, and you just come out every week or so and do this. Now, if they're really sprawling and indeterminate, I might still need a cage, but in a way, they're kind of garden art at the same time.
Yes, I was going to say sculpture.
That's right. That's right. Now over here, I've got some interesting things about lettuce. I tried to figure out how early I could get lettuce going this year. So I bought myself a little grow light, an indoor grow light, just a small one. And I started seeds in pots, then put them in a little plastic greenhouse, which I can show you later, and then put them out in the ground. These big lettuce plants were put in the ground as transplants the same day that I seeded this little bit of lettuce. So you can see right there that we're eating lettuce a lot sooner by starting it ahead of time. And this is kale right here, same thing. Started early. So
Wow.
I know, kind of more than we can eat, but that's a nice problem to have.
You have some sweet alyssum here. Is that a companion planting?
Yes. I've put the alyssum here and up by the tomatoes to attract pollinators, and what's going here and here later will be beans, which need the flowers pollinated, so that's why I thought I'll just put it right here. I don't have a lot of room for flowers, but I thought I'd put it where it counted.
Now, you also have some grow cover here.
I do. I have grow cover because in this bed I am growing broccoli and carrots, both of which are susceptible to bugs that will cause root problems. In the case of carrots, you get carrot rust fly, and in this you could get cabbage root maggot. And last year I kept this on until these were about 8 inches high, and I never had any problems. So I'm hoping that will be the same case again.
So I noticed that your spinach is starting to bolt.
Yes, it is. It's because it's getting a bit warm and it's ready to go. But I had a funny thing happen this year. I tried growing spinach inside, and all the seed packets say you shouldn't do that. And I found out why. I put it under my grow light. It got maybe 4, maybe this big, 4 leaves on it, and it bolted with 4 tiny leaves on it because it was just too hot. So I guess the message is believe the seed packet. It says don't start it inside. Don't waste your time.
Gosh, Valerie, that ceanothus is just gorgeous.
And it's a perfect location because it is another insect attractant, which is what we want. We want all the bees we can to get into the garden. I understand that, for instance, the bees need to make at least 9 trips to pollinate squash blossoms. I don't know, I'm not growing squash, but I am growing beans, and I don't know the number, but obviously we need to attract as many as we can.
Wow, some big kale.
Yes, this is giant kale, and believe it or not, it's still good. But when you have smaller kale, we eat that. But this I grew last October. I planted in the ground last October, covered it with the fabric, the row cover, all winter, and we started eating it in March. And we did have actually another row as well. That's why we couldn't finish this one. We had too much. But I wanted to, if you really were hungry and or you had to feed a lot of people in your neighborhood, this is a marvelous plant, and it's easy care, no bugs get it, so I always have kale.
Do you save the seed from
I
your kale?
haven't yet because I usually don't let it grow this big, but I think I will. Now, it's very pretty anyhow.
It is very
The thing
pretty.
is, I'm ready to put pole beans down here. See, I have limited space, and I'm trying to pack as much into it as I can, so I might have to sacrifice that.
Did it bolt because of the warmth, the unseasonable
It's just,
warmth?
it's done. Its growing season is done, yeah. But it's still tender. I won't force you to have a leaf, but it's good.
I like kale.
And I've got little strawberries growing down. This is the year I'm experimenting with putting as much in every corner as I can to see what happens.
I see you have some onions.
I do. I have onions and leeks. And the onions are Walla Walla sweets, and I'm growing them basically to store over the winter, and they last, I used up the last ones probably in March of this year. The leeks you leave in the ground. They just get bigger and sweeter, and I can come out in March and pull a leek, which is really a lot of fun.
How do you store the onions?
The onions I store just in an open plastic or wire basket in the garage, just so they're not touching each other. So it seems to work. Nothing special. The potatoes I have stored again in the garage, unheated garage, and I have just put them in paper bags, brown paper grocery bags, and folded them over loosely so they're out of the light. You have to keep them out of the light. And they seem to have been fine. Again, we went to about February this year.
Wow.
I had to stop and leave 12 of each one that I wanted to replant this year. And then I put them by the light in the garage, and they sprouted green sprouts and into the ground. So only 2 of these rows are brand new purchases this year. The others are all from last year. So
Wow.
that's sustainable.
I see you have a chart for your garden. Can you explain this to me?
Yes, what I've done here, this is for the vegetable garden, and what I've done is chart in color how the growing season of each vegetable that I put in. The main reason for this is to try to understand when I can plant the next vegetable. I'm trying to put as much into this garden as I can. I don't want bare space. So for instance here, this has shown me from the previous year that all the lettuce is going to be done by, this early lettuce is going to be done by the middle of June. So that tells me that in the middle of June in those beds I can plant my bean seeds. Without this chart I would be floundering around. One day I'd say, oops, there's no more lettuce and I don't have any bean seeds ready to go. So you can see I've done that all the way through the year.
So then you would perhaps start things.
That's right. This is showing where I started the seeds, and this is where I put it in the ground.
Gotcha.
So it's really helpful. And then also it shows things that go on and on. Like this is a certain kind of lettuce that went on and on. These are beets that go on for months, and then that helps me decide next year what's a valuable crop to plant.
Do the colors have any specific meaning?
Purple for beets, you know, that's it.
Okay.
Vegetables are kind of all the same color, green and red.
And then if you keep this year to year, you would also know, I mean, it would tell you about what that season was like if we had a cold snap
right.
or if we had a heat wave like
That's
we
right.
just did recently.
That's right. And I have one, the one from last year, there are some kale that I planted too late, and it's got a big X through it because it all fell over and died in the heat. So that you're right, it's very valuable from year to year.
Okay, one more thing for me to do.
Yeah, I know. Sorry.
Is this where you started your plant?
No, this is where I started the plants, right here. I bought myself this cute little, called a jump start light system, and it's just small, and you know, people can make their own in the garage with shop lights and that, but I didn't have any place. I wanted, this is in my office inside. So I have a tray that holds little plant, you know, soil mix like this, and as soon as it germinates, then I put them into slightly bigger pots and put them under the grow light, and then you can move this up and down. This goes up and down, so you keep it just about 2 inches above the lights. And then once they look fairly sturdy, they have about 6 or 8 leaves, then I start bringing them outside for a few hours, taking them back in, bringing them out, and then eventually, then I bring them in over to this little plastic greenhouse, which, believe it or not, even in the fall, even in the spring, I mean, when it's cold, when this is zipped down, it can be 70 degrees in there. And this is, you know, inexpensive, not fancy, but it does the job. And you can see here, I've got some little ones. See, there's the size of what I would turn into a bigger pot and let it start to grow. You see? And that's just been in there a week, but it's just ready to, in fact, I'll show you this if you want to see. I'll pop this out. And see the roots already in that?
Wow.
So you put that in bigger soil and it's ready to go. Now, you don't really need this right now in the summer. I could put those in the ground, but because I have space problems, I'm trying to set it up ahead.
Most gardeners have no problem growing vegetables in the summer months. The typical problem lies in having more than they can use all at once, and then having to resort to grocery store for fresh produce the rest of the year. There is a solution to that dilemma, though. It requires a little extra planning, but I think you'll agree that it's more than worth it. This month, our special guests are a team of our fellow master gardeners from Sequim. They've prepared a presentation on how to grow veggies all year round, and I'm hearing that now is not too soon to begin planning for that. So you may want to grab a pencil and paper because they have a lot of great information to share with you.
Earth is my beloved child. Earth is my trusted partner. Earth is my nurturing mother. Earth is my protecting father.
If you have thought about planting winter vegetables, but don't feel that you have the time, the capacity, or the knowledge, we hope that as a result of this presentation, You will not only gain an understanding of what it takes to grow winter vegetables, but also think about starting or expanding your own winter vegetable crop. Our presentation is designed to answer the following questions. Why plant winter vegetables? What and when do I plant? There are many crops that grow well, but Jan Keithley, John Norgord, and David Bell will focus specifically on leafy greens, root vegetables, and herbs. How do I protect my crop? Well, raised beds, mulching, blanching, and windbreaks provide a great environment, but John Norgord will be back to provide some examples of easy-to-use enclosures when they are needed. And finally, Barbara Emerson will share tips on nutritional value and uses for some of our local vegetables. Why plant winter vegetables? Well, having grown up and lived in the Rocky Mountain area for in my entire life, I'm completely amazed that you can grow vegetables 12 months out of the year. As a matter of fact, we wouldn't even be having this conversation if we lived in most other parts of the country. Our uniquely mild maritime climate is ideal for growing winter vegetables. The average minimum temperature rarely dips below freezing, even though our microclimates vary somewhat from West Jefferson County to Port Townsend and south to Quilcene. Most hardy crops are planted in July and August and have plenty of time to gradually harden up in preparation for winter. Anything straight from your garden is fresher and more nutritious any time of the year. But hardy, overwintered vegetables taste sweeter because they store more sugar as they are exposed to cold temperatures. Whatever vegetables you decide to grow, select varieties that are suited for winter harvest. Make sure that your crop is well established before the first frost, which ranges from mid-October to mid-November in Jefferson County. Keep it simple in terms of the number and complexity of crops you start with. Plan your planting dates late enough so that plants will not mature too far during the the summer and fall months, but soon enough to avoid early freezing. Keep in mind that weather conditions and microclimates vary, so you might want to plan a couple of planting dates 7 to 10 days apart. A simple plan would be to plant winter vegetables in a spot where you have already harvested a spring or early summer crop, but remember to rotate the vegetable family. A gentle south-sloped or terrace site captures the sun and provides the drainage needed for healthy winter vegetables. If you have harvested a summer crop there, your soil may need a light composting or fertilizer to replace nutrients. And as with any general gardening practices, keep a journal of the varieties, the planting dates, first and last harvest dates, and weather conditions. The varieties, the conditions, and special growing issues will vary by the type of vegetable. At this time, it's my pleasure to introduce Jan Keithley, who will provide more details about growing leafy greens.
Surprisingly, one of the most important aspects of planning a late fall winter garden is actually deciding on which leafy crops to grow. Because it's amazing, but there are a large number of possibilities out there that you can consider. Today we will talk about 4 crops, and the charts will give you some information on those crops. Before we get started, however, I would really like to talk about some basic considerations that you need to think about when you are planning your garden. First of all, you need to have good seed varieties that are preferable for this type of gardening. I will list those on the charts for you, but you do need to look at the packet for planting instructions. But I do want to point out that it's very critical that you plant your seeds in a timely fashion, and we'll give you the range, the recommended planting time. And if you want a successful garden, you need to plant the seeds at the recommended time. You need to provide adequate circulation between the plants, so you space them accordingly, and this is very, very important, especially in the summer. Covering the crops we will talk a little bit about later, but I would highly recommend it, especially with 3 out of the 4. You will be At the early stages, you want to make sure that you have adequate amount of misting or water for those young seeds and the plants. You want to avoid insect issues and sun scorching. Later on, when you get the tender plants, you want to, later on in the year when you have a dampening issue and we have our colder weather and rainfall, you want to be able to tenderly care for them by covering them so you can control the heat and the water going into the plants. You also want to avoid bolting. That's an important issue. Now, do not fertilize the overwintered crops late in the fall, and I would recommend not later than the middle part of November. This is because the nitrogen in the fertilizer will create new tissue, which is very subject to freezing as the weather gets colder. Now, you need to mulch these crops to hold in the moisture, but certainly remember to remove the mulch in late winter. The very first vegetable is Swiss chard. The recommended varieties are Perpetual, Fork Hook, or Ford Hook. I've seen it both ways, Giant, and Olympia's there too. Amanda talked about the minimum temperatures. I've listed them here because it's important for some areas, but we are pretty safe. I can't remember a time when we've gone below 10 degrees. The critical planting time for Swiss chard is the month of July. You'll plant them by seeds at that time, and the seeds recommended are bolt and mildew resistance. One of the issues you might want to prepare for are flea beetles, and you can use things like spraying canola oil or planting such crops as radishes or mustard seed nearby because the flea beetles love them as well. It takes 60 days for Swiss chard to reach its maturity, and the outer leaves you harvest first, and it's a wonderful vegetable. Barb will tell you a little bit more about that later. The next one is my favorite, and it's called Mizuna. It's in the mustard family, and Kyoto is the seed variety, but it's also part of the Asian vegetables that are so popular right now that people are asking lots of questions how to raise. The critical timing period for planting period for Mizuna is August 15 through October 10, and you need well-drained, cool soil to give plants a space as well as we talked about before. A fully developed plant takes 45 to 50 days to develop, and it looks very much like lettuce or maybe arugula, but it tastes very good. I love it. The next vegetable is kale, and surprisingly, the curlier varieties and other varieties for the winter, they're hardier. So that's why we can grow them so well. And I've been amazed at how many, I've seen at least six or seven at some of the, Nash's Produce, I'll mention that. So winter varieties suggested are Winter Red, Winter Boar, Improved Dwarf, Siberian, Red Chidori. Critical planting dates, July 20 to August 10. Kale is so hardy that it really needs very little protection, and diseases generally are not a problem. You harvest the outer leaves when they're about 8 to 10 inches long, and it takes 50 to 60 days for this vegetable to mature. Last but not least, we have spinach, and this is one of our tender vegetables. The varieties are Bloomsdale Tyee, cold-resistant Savoy, Giant Winter, and we also have an Olympia. It's best to cover spinach late October through February, and I would really cover spinach. The planting date is October 1 through 15, so it's a small window that you have to remember. You're harvesting other vegetables at that time, so you've got to remember some of these dates. You would plant those seeds in rich, well-drained soil, and it takes about 45 to 50 days to get a nice size leaf of spinach, but you can always harvest those little small ones 3 to 4 inches before that time. Now that's all the time we have right now to talk about the leafy greens, but I really want to encourage you to experiment with these greens as well as other crops. It should be a lot of fun for all of us to experiment with next year. So now I'd like to introduce John, who will talk to you about root vegetables.
As a mining engineer and an underground miner, I've been assigned today to talk to you about the underground or root vegetables. I'm going to talk about 3 different vegetables today that are representative of different groups of the root vegetables. But before I do that, I want to talk a little bit about some general characteristics of these. The first characteristic is that they need to be on well-drained soil. If you were going to sit through the winter in wet soil all the time, you would rot, and so will they. The next thing they need to be is they need to be deeply tilled, because these are vegetables that are going to grow into the ground and they need some place to grow. So you should till your soil at least 12 inches into the ground, or maybe a little further. Now, to protect them from the cold, the easiest thing to do is to take about 2 inches of soil and mound that soil up around the stems when it gets cold in the winter, and that will protect them through the winter. And if you prepare them like that, then you can harvest these vegetables, leave them in the ground, and take them as you need them all winter long. Carrots are the first vegetable type I'm going to talk about, and the variety that we found that both of our commercial growers that we talked to here in the area used was the Nantes Bolero, and that was a very sweet, very nice one. You need to plant these in late July for winter harvest. Problems that you have sometimes with the carrots, the most serious one is the carrot rust fly. Now, the carrot rust fly goes through 3 cycles of hatching out, and if you can avoid the first cycle of hatching out, the other 2 will probably not be a problem because they'll be subdued. So what you need to do if you're going to have carrot-type vegetables in May, which is when the first cycle occurs, you need to either cover your crops or not have that first planting in that particular area. You also need to be careful about carrot-type weeds. There are a lot of weeds that also attract these flies, and they'll come into your garden. The second thing that happens often is you'll see your carrot splitting, and you'll see 3 or 4 small stems growing out instead of a large carrot. What that's indicative of is they're hitting things in the soil like rocks or sticks, and so you need to remove all of those from soil in a carrot location. And the last thing is sun scald, and that will happen early on, right after you plant them in July during the heat of August. And so you need to stack a little bit of soil around the top of them again so that the top part of the carrot below the stem is not sticking out. The next vegetable I'd like to talk about is the Jerusalem artichoke. The Jerusalem artichoke is like a sunflower, and it has tubers, however. And when you plant the tubers, and when you get the tubers, you actually plant those sometime between November and March for next year's harvest. You harvest them like potatoes, and they grow like potatoes. They're a hardy plant, and they're basically pest-free, and they also will compete quite favorably with weeds. So if you plant Jerusalem artichokes in an area, they'll take over, and you probably won't have any weeds in that area. They'll take any kind of soil. They'll grow in almost any kind of soil. But at the end of the time when you harvest them, if you don't want them in the same location next year, you better be careful to spade up and get all the tubers out, or they'll be back again next year, and the year after that, and the year after that. The last group I'd like to talk about is leeks. Leeks are a large, sweet onion, and they're best grown by planting them in flats in July, and then let them grow a while and transplant them into the ground in early September. Leeks are pest tolerant. In fact, a lot of people say that if you plant leeks around your garden, that they'll drive away all the flying pests and bugs, and you won't have those pests in your garden. However, there's no scientific data that backs that up at the present time. One way to get the sweetest leek is to do a process called blanching. And in blanching, what you do is every 3 weeks in the fall, you build up about 1 inch of soil around your leek until you have 4 inches by the time it gets to really cold winter. What that does is it causes the leek white area to expand, which is the area that you want to have, and it also causes the leek to store more sugar. So blanching is a good technique to use to get your best leeks. And then when they're 24 inches tall, you can start harvesting anytime the rest of the winter. So in conclusion, what I'd like to say, plant them, cover them with soil, dig them up, and eat them. I'll turn the program over to Dave Bell now, who's going to talk to you about herbs.
Herbs are an essential part of any winter garden, valued for their aromatic qualities. They're used for seasoning, as well as making teas, and they also have medicinal purposes. They're used in smaller quantities than normal vegetables, so they take up less space in your garden. And they can be put just about anywhere. They can be fill-ins in your normal garden. They can have their own special little garden by the kitchen door, and they can also be used in ornamental settings. They're generally very low maintenance, easy to grow, and very hardy. Some of the more common herbs that are grown, coriander. Coriander is a popular herb. It should be planted in late August through March for winter use. It's sow the seeds from September and they'll last till January. The curl leaf varieties will probably need cloching for protection in the winter. You can start harvesting in September if you've planted in August. Oregano likes sunny, well-drained areas. It's good if you can plant it next to a fence for the warmth. It's a perennial, and you can propagate it by cuttings or division. Rosemary is a hardy evergreen shrub that can be used also as an ornamental. It can be quite decorative if it's kept trimmed. Sage is an herb that appreciates a drier soil and can be used in a low water type environment. It's a short-lived plant. It only lives from 3 to 4 years, but it's very easily propagated. So you can, once you start growing it, you can be sure you'll always have a sage plant if you care to. Winter savory, it's a perennial semi-evergreen. It may lose its leaves for a very brief period, but it's a very attractive border plant and has nice white flowers. Thyme is a very versatile herb. It's real hardy. It can be grown from seeds or cutting. It's an evergreen perennial, and it makes a good border plant, can be grown in rockeries, and can actually be used as a ground cover. Chives are a little bit different in that they prefer moist soil and shadier environment. They're a perennial. They tend to die back in October and November and reappear by February. If you protect them and cover them, you can force them to continue to produce through the colder weather. So those are the more, shall we say, familiar herbs. There are many, many kinds of herbs that you can experiment with, and I would encourage you to. It's an interesting plant kingdom, and it represents many different cultures, the cooking that enables you to do if you grow some of the more exotic herbs. And John will come back now and talk to you about cloching.
The history of covering crops is a fairly long one. And today, a few people use things like hard glass covers or things like that. The problem with those is they're expensive, and they also tend to break and other things like that. So in the early 1930s, Dr. Emmerich started the use of something called plastic sheeting, and that particular sheeting evolved into a rapidly growing industry of types of covers for plants that can be a little bit less expensive and can take a lot of different shapes. When you look at it, some of the first covers were also something called a cloche. Now, some really elaborate cloches came along. In some cases, they were like a little jar of glass that would cover a single plant, and they were mostly used in the house. Some of them had very big decorative etchings on them and things, and some of them can be quite expensive if you went to collect them today, but they'll only cover a single plant. From that, we've gone into our garden, and we found that we can use cloches by taking a plastic milk bottle, a large gallon one, cut the bottom out of it, and put the plastic bottle over the top of each individual plant. But there again, you're still only covering individual plants. And you have to be careful with those. You don't want to get ones that are very obscure because you want them fairly clear so they'll let the light through. You also do not want to use a plastic bottle that you put some weed killer in because your plant will bite it right away if you do that. The next thing, and I see my neighbor has one of these, and it's called a cold box. And usually those sometimes are made out of old windows, and a lot of times they're made out of glass. The problem with the glass when you open and close them is they can very easily be broken. And with any of these enclosures, you need to have some ventilation because you'll find on warm days during the winter, the ventilation is required or the plants can overheat. Ground covers, you can use some small ground covers made out of a fairly hard plastic like a plexiglass that you would put over something. They're fairly small, they're easily moved, but the problem with them is they're small enough that these plants, when they grow in the winter, the leaves and other things may touch the sides of those because they're so small, and then they'll freeze to those plants, and then it ruins your crop when all the leaves freeze to them. The next more small one, but larger and large enough to use is called a row tunnel. Now you can easily build those. What you do is you build them out of plastic pipe, probably 3/4 inch. You bend it over, and then you lay the plastic over the top of it. You need to leave some area, either the ends open or the sides, so you can pull them back. You can actually clip the plastic from each hoop that you make to the hoop by using either a piece of 1-inch pipe that's been cut in half, short piece, or you can actually go down to the office supply store and use one of those large clips for clipping papers together to clip them as well. Those are good for crop rotation because they are easily moved. And then probably the bigger ones that you can put more stuff in and still be able to move are like mini greenhouses. They also are made of plastic. They're also made out of the same plastic pipe. They usually have a wooden frame on the bottom to provide them with some stability so that they won't blow away. And when you put those in there, it gives you quite a bit of space to plant a lot of plants. You can pick those up and move them from place to place as you go by picking up the ends of the 2x4s or 2x6s or whatever you use, and then moving them to another place. And what you do for crop rotation is it's very easy to plant some plants in there. When they're mature and you harvest those, then you move them to the next area, plant some more plants in there, and move those as well. Now I'm going to turn it over to Barbara, and she's going to talk to you about storage and some use of these vegetables and some other aspects of the vegetables.
You can enjoy the health benefits of winter vegetables from your garden with a quality and freshness that you just can't get from produce in your grocery store. Leafy greens are high in beta-carotene and vitamins A and C. They have fiber and minerals such as iron, calcium, and potassium. Carrots are high in vitamin A and beta-carotene, and they may not improve your eyesight, but the USDA has indicated that eating carrots may help to lower your cholesterol. Jerusalem artichokes are not only high in potassium, but they store carbohydrates in the form of inulin for energy without converting the starch to sugar, and this is particularly helpful with people with diabetic issues. Herbs are a powerful flavor enhancer, and just a small amount can make a big difference to your winter soups and sauces, and also salads. The beauty of a winter garden is that storage is not a big issue. Oftentimes, the root vegetables get sweeter when left in the ground longer. When they are harvested, it's best to store them unwashed in your refrigerator. Leafy greens are best stored in a damp cloth in the refrigerator, and root vegetables in a dry cloth in the refrigerator as well. Fresh garden vegetables are unsurpassed. Leafy greens can be cooked or used raw in salads, cooked especially good in stir-fry dishes. Winter carrots, particularly the Nantes variety, are very sweet and provide a sweet winter vegetable like none you've ever tasted. Jerusalem artichokes again can be used raw in salads or cooked in soups and stews. Leeks are similar to onions but have a milder and more delicate flavor. Fresh herbs are used often as spices, as Dave mentioned, in Mexican, Chinese, and East Indian cooking, and also in teas for soothing nighttime drink or even medicinal purposes. Winter vegetables and herbs can be incorporated into your garden and also into favorite recipes. I like to winterize certain classic recipes by adding winter vegetables. A great successful one was chicken noodle soup with parsnips, carrots, and turnips, as well as the usual onions and celery. Explore new vegetables such as Jerusalem artichokes to make a delicious cream of Jerusalem artichoke soup, or the rainbow carrots that we've often seen in the wintertime. We encourage you to consider year-round vegetables in your garden, keeping in mind that the time to plant may be about the time you're harvesting your summer vegetables, and remembering that winter crops will grow more slowly when the weather turns cooler, but will be ready for you to harvest in the cold of winter. The rewards of a winter garden are great. Providing food for yourself and your family that is of the highest quality and nutritional value and freshness without worrying about chemicals or additives or the time it took to get from the farm to the market. They can be incorporated anywhere in your garden and in your landscape, thinking outside the box and outside the raised bed. Now you've seen how you can enjoy the taste and nutritional benefits of fresh homegrown vegetables all year round. There are a myriad of printed and electronic resources that can help you, along with local master gardener volunteers in Jefferson County. And we were fortunate also to receive some helpful advice and information from 2 local organic farms, West Wind Farm and Nash's. Do have faith in your abilities and in the plants. Experiment, journal, and have a good time. You will be rewarded.
I plant carrot seeds. Earth is my trusted partner. Earth is my nurturing mother. Earth is my protecting father. Earth is my beloved child. Earth is my trusted partner. Earth is my nurturing mother. Earth is my protecting father. Earth is my hope for the future in my garden. I plant carrot seeds. I plant carrot seeds. in my garden.